Thanks for watching the Daily Debate live from Cairo, from Nile TV International. I'm Tagreed Hussein, and I have the pleasure of your company. For the coming hour, we will be talking about the main headlines in the... So one of the important headlines is the president attending the African-Indian Cooperation Summit, a very important summit that actually binds together Africa with many other nations. India-Africa Forum Summit is a summit where the focus is on fighting poverty and improving healthcare, also developing education. And developing education is one of the important files actually that Egypt is quite interested. It's quite a challenge here, but we as media, as youth, as education professionals, all hand in hand to make quality education a very important priority for the country. So this comes within the target goals according with the African Union agenda, which is for the year 2063, and the 2030 agenda for the sustainable development that was announced in New York in September. India is one of the most important examples of cooperation between countries working for the well-being of developing one. And we can always remember how India had contributed to the transition in economic and technical fields of cooperation of Africa since the year 2008. So a very important and an interesting file talking about the 21st century leadership, new administrations paving the way for prosperity and leading global economy. 6 of the 12 World Bank choices are African. Well, many interesting headlines in the news for tonight. A very distinctive panel with me, Professor Dr. Mahna Zaki, a global strategic consultant. Thank you very much, Professor Mahna, for coming.
Thank you.
And I have also with me Professor Dr. Emad Mahna, Professor of Political Economy. Thank you so much,
Thanks
Dr.
for having
Mahna.
me. Thank you.
Well, professors, many ideas, brainstorming ideas. When we talk about India, we talk about Egypt, challenges, but still the limit, and both are going to work in a sense of partnership. We'll be discussing this sense of partnership between Egypt and India and more with the co-link with Africa. This report, and we'll be back.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi arrived in New Delhi to attend the 3rd India-Africa Forum Summit, where presidents and representatives of 40 African countries discussed means of developing economic cooperation and mutual investments between India and the African continent.
Egypt's participation comes amid its efforts to strengthen its economic ties with various developing powers, especially economically developing countries such as India. El-Sisi's visit to India marks his first visit to the country since he was sworn into office in June 2014. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Ala Youssef said that the summit discussed ways to develop the economic cooperation between India and Africa and enhancing the investment exchange as India became one of the best commercial partners to Africa. The Egyptian president met his Indian counterpart, President Pranab Mukherjee, as Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as a number of Indian businessmen and senior officials. The Egyptian leader discussed possibilities of Indian investments in Egypt, especially the new development projects in areas around the Suez Canal, such as the planned industrial and logistics hub. Indian-African relations have been steadily evolving in recent years, making India one of the major trading partners of Africa. Trade between India and Egypt during the last financial year has been recorded at 4.76 billion American dollars. Most importantly, India is the 6th largest trading partner of Egypt and the 2nd largest export destination. India's imports from Egypt were worth 1.74 billion American dollars during 2014 to 2015, and the export basket of Egyptian products to India has seen diversification. Indian exports to Egypt during 2014 to 2015 recorded at 3.02 billion American dollars. Out of the 50 Indian companies operating in Egypt with a combined investment of almost $3 billion, approximately half are joint ventures and wholly owned by Indian subsidiaries. After Mr. Sisi's visit to India, he will visit Bahrain to meet King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa to discuss strong relations. The India-Africa
Summit, the biggest diplomatic event to be hosted by India in the last 3 decades, will begin on Monday, and the 4-day event will see participation by all 54 African nations. The forum is seen as India's effort to consolidate the historical ties of the African continent, endowed with large reservoirs of minerals and hydrocarbons. Last week, the Indian government approved the signing of a support agreement with Egypt, which increases cooperation between both countries in maritime activities.
Professor Dr. Mahna Zaki, Global Strategic Consultant, thank you for coming. Professor Mahna, talking about India and Africa, definitely Africa is considered to be, it's not only a challenging continent, but also the continent of dreams. We find the Chinese investing in Africa and many other countries eyeing Africa. So how do you see this sense of challenge and dream at the same time?
As we discussed it earlier, I believe it was early September, when we were here on the forum and we were discussing the importance of Africa and how Africa economy is playing a huge role in the global economy. And now Africa is really getting the attention of the world, not just the rest of the world, the attention of the States, the attention of Europe, China, and the whole world is really directing their attention to Africa because Africa is booming, and Africa now has been on the, not just playing a huge role on the global economic platform, but also on other levels, even in cinema industry, you see. So Africa is booming, and the potentials of Africa with the current international economic crisis, Africa is doing better, and I believe that the attention given to Africa is well deserved and well meant. And when we talk about the Indian African Forum Summit, this is a great step. It has been, it started in 2008, actually, those meetings and those summits. But the whole point is Egypt now is playing a pivotal role after being chosen by majority to have a permanent seat in the Security Council for the UN. Egypt is playing a huge role and taking a leading role in Africa and also internationally. And I believe that this summit has proven that. And the way the president has spoken and the important topics to be covered in the summit and the bilateral relations between India and Africa, where Egypt plays a pivotal role, I believe this is an important transformation in Egypt's international relations policy and in Egypt's pivotal role regionally and globally.
Definitely, and eyeing this important summit, Professor Mahna, we have more than one important headline that the whole world is actually talking about. The whole world is putting healthcare, putting climate change, and talking also about poverty, eradicating illiteracy. The file that is quite interesting for us is definitely also education. So how do you see the topics addressed and the presence of Egypt as a heavyweight, how will it make a difference?
Absolutely. If you allow me, there is a dimension, another dimension to Africa, and when it comes to India, after what Dr. Mahna said, is I consider Africa the extension of Indian liberty and freedom, because it hosted Gandhi quite a long time ago, and you see a lot of Indian refugees that were hosted by the African countries. We see that in Zambia, in in Zimbabwe, South Africa on top of it, about 2.5 million. So I think on the political side it plays a major role to the Indian nation. Culturally also there is a lot of ties, and therefore the economic ties becomes as a result of the cultural as well as the political ties between the Indians in Africa and the indigenous Indians. Egypt definitely also becomes very similar to the Indian nation in terms of colonization for a long time. They've been colonized for about 120 years. British rule. They went through a number of issues or let's say conflicts, if you like, the same way that Egypt went through in 1952. So there's a lot of ties.
Exposed to the same...
A lot of challenges, exactly.
Similarities between them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Egypt has always been, you know, playing a major role, as Dr. Mahna said, particularly during Mr. Nasser and also during Sadat. And most importantly, when it started with the former President Mubarak, you know, signing the establishment of the first joint venture commission in 1983. Yeah. So Egypt definitely is considered to the Indians the leader of the African nation, number one because of its participation in liberation movements, which was led by President Nasser, and helping the Indians as well to take their place. At this moment, I think President Sisi notices the gap between Egypt and Africa as a whole and the Indians when it comes to technology, as you kindly mentioned, as well as education. They're quite advanced in education. The Indians are very focused on one of the three factors that build a strong economy. So when you look at building strong economies, we need land, labor, and capital. So they focused on the labor. And I think this is really the drive that Egypt needs to look at, because we don't have a problem with resources, we don't have a problem with land, we have a problem with labor. Labor is not as qualified as it should be on the international level, and that was highlighted by the International Bank. Dr. Zaki can highlight more on
your
that.
Suggestions, Professor Zaki, concerning this issue of you know, training the expertise and making good use of the potential that we do have, investing in people rather.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, this was the main focus of the Indian Prime Minister Modi in his opening speech at this summit. That he was saying the contribution of India to Africa is really focusing on investing on human capital and investing more on education, on training, and more than 25,000 Africans have done training in India, and the technology is really focusing more on education, e-education, and the main point here is helping the Africans to really invest more in their education, especially that 2/3 of India is under the age of 35, and 2/3 of Africa is under the age of 35. So the whole idea that the majority of the inhabitants of India and Africa are under the age of 35, which is mainly the youth, and this is the future. So there is no other way except investing in human capital through education, through training, through skills, qualifications, and India would be a great opportunity for Africans, as we have similar, I won't say identical, but we have a lot of common, you know, history. We have common feelings. We went through the same, almost a lot of similar, you know, circumstances, political circumstances. But here, and economic, cultural, here brings me to a point where we really look at India as a role model in tolerance, in accepting the other. The more than 20 languages are in India, and they still can understand each other. They can still work with each other. Gandhi sets a great model of passive resistance without any violence. So this is a great model
tolerance,
and for tolerance, democracy. India represents a role model in its influence internationally through soft power, through their culture, through their colors, through their traditions, through the soft power used through their film industry.
Right.
Yeah, you can't believe what Bollywood is doing internationally, and even the subjects. There is no comparison when you watch a movie, you know, where the story is really defending ethics and values and traditions, and another story promoting drugs and violence and Star Wars, you see, so there is a big difference here. So the influence of soft power shown by India is a great influence, and we as Africans, and in particular Egypt, we can learn a lot from this experience.
Yeah, we can learn a lot from the experience, and as you put it this way, Professor Mahna, we're always opting for a second crossing for the country. This won't happen except with investing in the youth and their potential.
Absolutely.
How are we going to eye this with India, especially in expertise where Indians are very clever and smart at, like the IT business, like technologies?
Yeah, yeah, we look at it on two levels. On a higher education level, we're talking about an exchange in studies, in actual subjects, curriculum, and this has already taken place in a number of institutions where the exchange students to see what is happening over there in India, and we learn quite a lot from them. On the training or vocational training rather, and I think this is the main focus of President Sisi, is the actual vocal training, because we do have a large number of higher education qualification or qualified people, but unfortunately Egypt at this point needs a vocational training and a technical training that really focus on